The first thing I started to think about was the control medal in the centre of the unit. It consists of a shiny metal orb sat on top of a light ring. This is then encased in a chrome unit which is embedded into the full Guyver unit. I actually came across the perfect outer casing to the control medal when I discovered these coffee lids. I felt that this was absolutely perfect in shape and size for the dome to sit in. I then began my search for the perfect semisphere to insert into this casing. I wanted to make sure that it fits nice and snugly and looks like one complete unit. I realised that the LED bulb fits absolutely perfectly into the lid from the coffee cup, and it creates an almost perfect control medal shape. I decided that the best effect would be if I removed the dome from the LED light bulb and hot glued it into place in the coffee lid. As you can see, it fits absolutely perfectly and it looks like one completely solid piece. Even without the hot glue, it fits really well into shape, and it takes quite a bit to remove it. Once I had finished assembling the control medal, I then started to consider how I was going to light it. I wanted to make it glow really brightly, like it does in the anime series. After a random trip to my local pound shop, I discovered a 360-degree orb cob light. At only £2, I felt that this was an absolute bargain, and even if I didn't use it for this particular model, I'm sure it would come in very handy in the future. When I got it home, I was very impressed to find that it contained a very small but very bright LED, which I could use for the model, and decided that this was going to be the base of the illumination for the control medal. In addition, it also contained a base which contains a small magnet, perfect for holding the cob light in place. I felt that this could be a really good way of completing the model and attaching it to a display case or base. Once I had finished assembling the control medal and I was happy with it, I then decided that I wanted to paint it. I did have a go at this before off camera, and the results were, well, less than impressive. Now, if you are interested, I am using the Plasticoat Brilliant Metallic Spray Paint. The reason I bought it is because I was looking for a highly polished chrome finish, and obviously the cap led me to believe that that was the kind of finish that I was going to be getting. However, having tested it, it's not as shiny as I was expecting. It's not as reflective, and it's a little bit more dull. It's not quite the effect I was looking for. I decided to try using some alternative spray paint. This one I bought for £4.99 from Aldi here in the UK. Again, it's promising a mirror-like finish, but I thought I'd give it a test. Maybe go head to head and see what turns out the best. In order to compare each of the paints, I decided to make up some test boards using some cardboard and some plastic spoons. Using masking tape, I attached 2 spoons to each sheet of cardboard, making sure I noted which primer I was using for each of the tests. I used white, grey and a black satin spray paint underneath the chrome finishes. I wanted to see if that helped with the reflective properties of the chrome spray paints. In addition, as a control test, I left one of the pairs of spoons unprimed as well. I then gave each pair of spoons a coating in a different primer, making sure that they were covered evenly. Once the primers had dried, I then took it in turns to paint each one of them with a different chrome paint to see if there was any difference, and I wanted to see if it was possible to get a finish that looked like the mirror finish as promised on the lids. I also needed to find out if there was a specific formula to follow in order to get the finish that I was looking for. Now, when you are coming to use any kind of spray paint, either in a tin or using an airbrush, it's always best to try and ventilate your area as best as possible. Ideally, you would have a dedicated spray booth. Unfortunately, I don't have one set up, so I'm just going to open the door. Just makes it a little bit more safe rather than inside the shed. Looking at the final results, it's actually quite surprising. I've noticed that the Easy Home silver paint, which is actually cheaper than the one I bought from Aldi, performed a lot better than the Plasticoat brilliant metallic finish. Overall, the Easy Home paint is a lot more reflective than the Plasticoat. It's also quite surprising to note that the primer used didn't really have much of an effect. Ironically, I feel that the test piece, without any primer, actually performed slightly better than the others. Although it doesn't actually show particularly well on camera, there is a noticeable difference between the two finishes. Obviously, these are only a comparison between two different spray paints. I am aware that there are various other brands available, some of which may or may not perform better than the ones I already have. This cap is not an exact representation of the finish that can be achieved with this product. Unfortunately, I don't have the time or the budget to purchase a wide range of spray paints at this particular moment and compare them. However, if you are interested in seeing that in a future video, drop me a comment down below and let me know. Perhaps I can find a sponsor who would be interested in putting forward some of this paint and I can do a really good bench test. Having noted the results of these two paint comparisons, I have made the final decision to use the Aldi Easy Home paint to spray the control medal. I'm not going to use any primer, I'm going to just spray the paint directly onto the model. In order to make sure that I have a light ring around it, I have purchased some thin masking tape and applied this around the bottom of the dome. I'm going to leave this until the paint dries before removing it. This will then leave a gap for the light to emit from. Once I had made my final decision, I then used the paint and sprayed the control medal. Whilst allowing it to dry, I made a dust cover using some cardboard and my cutting mat. Hopefully, this will prevent any dust getting to the paint while it's drying. Unlike the first attempt, I am not going to touch this for about 3 or 4 days. I'm going to make sure the paint is completely dried before I even attempt to go near it. I do not want to make the same mistakes that I made on the first attempt of my control medal. A couple of days later, it was the moment of truth. Removing the cardboard from around the control medal was slightly nerve-wracking. My previous attempt, as I mentioned, had been atrocious, and I was very worried that it wouldn't look anywhere near as good as I was hoping. However, I was extremely pleased with the final outcome. The alternative spray paint I've used has actually done the job very, very well. The finish is extremely reflective and it looks amazing. Now, I had sprayed it with a nice chrome finish and it looked really good in the beginning, but it's starting to dull just with the wear and tear and handling as well. I also noticed that around this ring here, where I want the light to emit, some of the paint had kind of dripped down when I painted it and it just looked a little bit messy, and I wanted to tidy that up before applying it to the final model. I also wanted to make sure that the nice chrome finish actually matched the piece I was planning on using for the back as well. Now, you won't actually see this piece will be underneath the unit, and it's actually got a magnet inside which connects to the base, which is going to hold it in place. But I still want it to look nice and chrome and shiny as well. The first thing I had to do was remove all of the old paint. Finding some old terps in my shed, I decided to give that a go. Using a cloth and a quick splash of it, it started to remove the paint very quickly and very easily, giving a very nice, clean, smooth finish. I also removed all the paint from the back sphere as well, using the same method. I discovered that not all of the paint was coming off, however. There was some slight pieces that were left on there, where the paint had settled quite thickly. I decided to try some gel nail polish remover to see if that removed the last of the paint. It did have an effect, although I didn't clear all of it. However, by this point I decided that the paint I had removed and the paint that was left was still fine because I was going to spray paint over it all anyway. Once I had finished removing all the paint as best I could, I then masked up the area where I want the light to emit from on the control medal, and then I gave both the front control medal and the back piece a spray using some chrome spray paint. Unfortunately, spray painting in the middle of January in the UK does have its drawbacks. I don't have a dedicated spray booth here in my shed, and unfortunately I'm basically having to spray outside. Reading the instructions, the spray paint says I should operate in temperatures of 16 to 25 degrees, which sounds lovely. However, I'm actually spraying in temperatures of about -2, which is not ideal. I'm hoping that the temperature is not going to have a huge detrimental effect on the paint finish, because I'll be honest, I don't have time to wait till summer when the temperatures get better, and I can't really spray it indoors either because my missus complains about the smell, which I don't blame her because apparently it stinks. Despite the freezing cold temperatures, I did press ahead, and I have now resprayed the control medal as well as the back piece of the control medal, which appears on the rear of the unit as well. And also I gave the little stand that it's going to sit in a gentle spray as well, just to tie it all nicely together. Hopefully the paint won't freeze or have any detrimental effect, and it will dry as I hoped, but we'll have to wait to see. Have you ever tried to spray anything outside? Have you ever had any good results, bad results? Please let me know in the description down below. I'm probably doing it completely wrong. Fair enough, I put my hands up to that, but I'm literally working with what I have, which is a small table just outside the shed, which is currently covered in frost and snow and ice. And I think I've seen a woolly mammoth out there as well, actually. Now, I have to wait in real time, but through the magic of editing, here we go. Once I had finished respraying the control medal, going back to it, I'll be honest, I wasn't hugely impressed. The finish wasn't as shiny as I had remembered it being the first time that I painted it. I got to a point where I thought that, do you know what, I'm just going to have to accept my fate, and that's going to be the final finish on the model. But then I came across this video by Mechs and Monsters on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the description below. In the video, he describes a different way of creating chrome using graphite powder, and this piqued my interest.
Just keep buffing and buffing and buffing, and you'll literally see it just start to sheen and shine, and like that is a proper nice chrome.
Having watched the video several times through, I decided that this might be an alternative method of getting a nice shiny control medal to look how I wanted it. So I gave it a go. Before I let loose on the actual model itself, I decided to do some tests, and what I'll do is I'll publish the results in that in a separate video, so look out for that. But I was really happy with the results, so I decided to press ahead and use the graphite powder to cover the control medal and hopefully get it nice and mirror-like and shiny. After quite a lot of applying graphite powder to the control medal, buffing it out and just generally polishing it up, I have basically ended up with a control medal which I feel really wasn't the effect I wanted, even with the graphite powder. Now, I must be honest, I think that the issue with the graphite powder is down to my application of it rather than the actual technique itself. I started to notice items with highly shiny, polished, reflective surfaces when I was out and about visiting various shops. It made me reconsider the control medal, and I decided that if I really wanted the best results, the best thing to do would be completely start from scratch. As I was putting some of our Christmas decorations away, I had another eureka moment. In the decorations box, I actually found a very large, very shiny and reflective bauble. Unknown to my missus, The bauble very quickly found its way into my collection of bits and bobs, put aside especially for this project. Off camera, I used a rotary tool and carefully cut it in half, only to discover it didn't quite fit over the dome. I spent a frustrating evening playing around to see if I could rework the control model, and eventually chose to mount the half bauble on a slightly smaller light bulb dome, mounted just inside the outer casing. I used the lid from a bottled fruit drink to diffuse the LED light inside the dome and hot glued it all into place before attaching the entire control model component into the inner part of the unit, making sure it was aligned with the internal organism.